Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Selling Greenville, your favorite real estate podcast here in Greenville, South Carolina. I am your host as always, Stan McCune, realtor right here in the Greenville area, providing you tons of content on Greenville and the real estate market in general. You can find all of my contact information in the show notes if you want to just talk about the show, or more importantly, at least for me, if you need a realtor in the Greenville area, I'm your guy. You can find my contact information in the show notes. And if you like this show or if you hate it, if you like me, if you hate me, whatever the case may be, please hit the subscribe button, rate, review the show, comment, all of those good things. That is the primary way that you guys can support this content and encourage me to keep going with it. So please do that. I really enjoy when I see those ratings and reviews come in. Today, we are going to be talking about data that was published by the National Association of REALTORS just a few weeks ago on demographics of home buyers and sellers, among other things, but primarily demographic information. And I found this to be immensely interesting, immensely helpful, and I think that you guys will find it interesting as well. Now, this isn't Greenville-centric, but sometimes in the show, I will go into more national sorts of things. We look at the Greenville data every month. It's good sometimes to take a step back and just look at some of the national data. So I'm going to jump right in. We have about 30 slides that I'm going to be looking at here. So this is a great one to watch on YouTube. If you want to look up at Selling Greenville Pod on YouTube, you can find it there. But we're going to start right from the top with, they broke down all of the different generations of home buyers and sellers that are still here to this day, starting all the way with the silent generation. I'm just going to go through this quickly, just so you guys have a framework. Here's when all these different generations were born. The silent generation was born between 1925 and 1945. Now they split boomers into older boomers and younger boomers because there's a big difference. Older boomers were born between 1946 and 1954, and the younger boomers were born between 1955 and 1964. Gen X, they're kind of on an island on their own. We don't split them apart. They were born between 65 and 79. But millennials, we do split them up. Older millennials, of which I am considered a part, were born between 1980 and 89. Younger millennials between 1990 and 98. And Gen Z between 99 and 2011. Now, what we would expect is that basically millennials should be the primary purchasers of real estate right now in the U.S., and that is exactly what we find. If you combine the younger and older millennials together, you get 38% of home buyers are millennials. 17 are the younger millennials, and 21% are the older millennials. But interestingly, and we've talked about this before, Gen X has been behind the curve in a lot of ways. Only 24% of home buyers are made up of Gen Xers. What about boomers? This is what you wouldn't expect. 31%. So only a little bit below millennials, but 31%, which is greater than Gen Xers and way more than Gen Zers, who only make up 3%. But 31% of boomers, 19% younger boomers, 12% older boomers make up home buyers right now. So we've got a very interesting curve right now where we have basically the 25 to early 40s and the 60s through 70s demographics are the ones that are really propping up real estate right now, whereas the Gen Xers between 44 and 58 years old have kind of been left behind, only make up 24% of home buyers. Let's look real quick at household income of home buyers. I'm not going to go through all of this data. Again, if you want to see the slides, you can see them on YouTube. I will publish this on YouTube. But by far, the household income of home buyers is over $85,000. Like before $85,000, this data breaks it down a lot of different ways. But we've got less than 25,000 is only 2%, 25 to 35,000 is 3% of home buyers, 35 to 45 is 4%, so forth and so on, until you get to 85,000 through 100,000. That makes up 9% of all buyers. And then the biggest number is between 100 and 125,000. Again, this is household income. That's 15% of home buyers. And then 125 to 150 is 9%. 150 to 175 is 8%. There's a weird little drop off between 175 and 200,000. It's only 5% of home buyers. But then we jump all the way up to the biggest number for household income for home buyers right now is 200,000 or more. That made up 16% of home buyers. So the vast majority of home buyers are making at least 85,000 or more, and really the vast majority is making at least 100,000 or more in their household right now. Unfortunately, this is the dynamic. This is what we're talking about when we say that certain generations have been left behind. This is what we're talking about when we say that housing is the least affordable that it's ever been. You basically have to have a household income of basically 6 digits in order to be able to buy a house in today's market, by and large. Now, obviously, there's frugal people out there that don't make as much, but don't spend as much. But we're talking about on a meta level, that is typically what we're seeing. Let's look at the adult composition of homebuyer households. By the way, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but I'm not going through every single slide the NAR published. I hand selected some of these that I personally found interesting. Adult composition of buyers. Here's where things kind of get interesting. So we've got married couples, single females, single males, unmarried couples, and other, whatever that may constitute. And if you're between, let's just talk about all buyers for a second. 59% of all home buyer households are married couples. And what this doesn't specify is whether they have children or not. So 59% of all home buyers are married people. What's interesting, though, is the next biggest demographic is single females. They make up 19% of all buyers. And then you have single males, which are 10%, and then unmarried couples, which are 9%. And these percentages fluctuate based on the age, and that's to be expected, right? The 18 to 24 demographic, married couples only make 32% of that demographic because not too many 18 to 24-year-olds are married. But what's interesting here as well is the second place is single females. They make up 31% and then of the 18 to 24 demographic, and then single males 20%, and then unmarried couples 15%. I find that very interesting, and this data holds throughout. Single women are more likely to be homeowners than single men. But married couples are by far the most likely to be married, particularly when you get to the millennial demographic, 13 to 43. 66% are married couples among home buyers. And then you've got 13% single females, 8% single males, 11% unmarried couples. So couples dominate, right? And this is, again, a function to a certain extent of housing affordability or inaffordability, because what you've got is a lot of dual income households now that are, and that's essentially the requirement in order to buy a house, is that you have multiple incomes or you have a very, very high income earner relative to the rest of the population. All right, moving right along. Number of children under the age of 18 residing in household. And so this broke down how many children in a household between none, 1, 2, or 3 or more. And again, interestingly, none, no children under the age of 18 residing in the household dominated this number. Out of all buyers, 70% of home buyers had no children ultimately residing in their household. That's an insane number. And it's over 50% for every demographic except for the 34 to 43 demographic. That demographic, 35%, it's still a majority, not a true majority, but a simple majority, are no children. 35%, 21% one child, 28% two, and 16% between 34 to 43 years of age have 3 or more. But the rest of these are all, particularly with the older population, to be expected. They're not going to have too many children. But pretty much all the other demographics have a huge front number of no children and then much smaller numbers for children, with the only exception being the 34 to 43 age demographic. Homebuyer education. I found this interesting. So they broke down buyers by whether they have a high school diploma, not even a high school diploma, associate's degree, bachelor's degree, et cetera, et cetera. The largest number on here, 31% of home buyers have a bachelor's degree. 26% have a master's degree. So over half of home buyers have, and there's two additional categories as well that are higher education. Some grad work is 7%, and then doctoral degrees 7% as well. So 71% of home buyers have a bachelor's degree or greater. And so there is a direct correlation between the level of education that you have and your ability to purchase real estate. Now, doesn't mean that you can't, but again, this is tied heavily into the type of work that people have as well. Typically, better education results in better pay, which then results in more of an ability to purchase real estate. What about first-time home buyers in an age group? Let me talk about this for a second here. Of all home buyers, and I found this to be very interesting, of all home buyers, 32%, basically a third of all home buyers when this was sampled, were first-time home buyers. That's insane. 75% of those aged 25 to 33 naturally were first-time home buyers, but 44% of those between 34 and 43 were first-time home buyers. Huge number. And again, those 44 to 58 years old, 24% of them were first-time home buyers when they bought between those ages. So again, we're seeing first-time home buyers get older and older and older as a result of housing affordability. Okay, what are the primary reasons for purchasing a home? This is a few little things that I found interesting. Desire to own a home of my own. 26% of all buyers gave that as the reason. And, that's a very American thing, right? I want to own something. I don't want to borrow something from someone else. So a lot of people, they just want to own a home. They want to say, this is my home. In second place was 12% that said a desire to be closer to family, friends, relatives. So these are people that, perhaps because of the limited options when you're renting, they would rather buy. They have the ability to buy and be closer to people they care about than they would if they rented. Third place was a desire for a larger home. We've talked about this before. When you're renting, you only have so many options when it comes to the homes that you're going to purchase, and so oftentimes they're going to be smaller than homes that you could buy. So 11% of all buyers had the desire for a larger home as a reason for them purchasing a home. And then we have a bunch of other reasons: change of family situation, retirement, desire for a smaller home is up there as well. And these fluctuate based on the demographic. So the older population, the older you get, the more the desire to be closer to family, friends, relatives becomes a bigger reason. So 31% of those aged 69 to 77 are purchasing a home to be closer to family, friends, or relatives, and 28% of those 78 to 98 are doing that, and 18% of those 59 to 68. So what does that come out to? We got 49. So it's coming out to about 77% of those that desire to be closer to family, friends, or relatives are those at least basically 59 years or older. And so there's a lot of interesting things. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm not going to get into all the weeds. We got to push through here, but you can see the charts on there. It's quite interesting. Why new and previously owned homes were purchased? Okay, so this is kind of a clunky way of wording it. Typically, we say new and existing homes, right? New construction versus previously built construction that has already been lived in. In this NAR data, they're calling it new versus previously owned home rather than the traditional new versus existing homes. Whatever. So why are buyers buying new homes? Well, 45% say to avoid renovations or problems with plumbing or electricity. 26% said the ability to choose and customize design features. 26% as well, the amenities of a new construction community. and then a variety of other reasons. Those that are buying existing homes or previously owned homes, 38% that they found it to be better overall value. Similarly, 36% said a better price, 23% more charm and character, and 18% simply a lack of inventory of new homes. I'll take a sip of my LaCroix here, so I don't start coughing and sneezing for you guys. But those are reasons why, again, if you're thinking about purchasing new construction versus purchasing something existing, here are some considerations. And these, I feel like, definitely hold true for the Greenville market as well. And by the way, just a plug, as always, I help people all the time purchase new construction. It's one of my specialties. And so don't feel like you can't utilize a realtor for new construction. I do this all the time. The builders will pay to have a buyer agent. The vast majority of builders like buyer agents, and so keep that in mind if you're looking at potentially new construction in the Greenville area. Purchase price compared with asking price. We talk about this in the Greenville stats all the time, but I found it interesting to see on a meta level what is the NAR seeing. So the top number on here was 31% of buyers paid 100% of the list price. Very interesting number. Second place, 27% paid between 95 to 99%. And in third place, 20% paid over list price between 101 and 110%. And actually even more than that, because 5% paid more than 110% of list price. So 25% of home buyers are paying over list price. 27% are paying slightly under list price. 31% are paying exactly what list price is. And then 18% paid for less, paid 94% or less than what a home was listed for. So very interesting. If you are in the market for a home right now, overwhelming odds are you're going to pay at or above list price still. If, basically 45% of home buyers have, or 45 to 44% are potentially paying below list price, but the vast majority of those are still paying over 94% of what a home is listed for. Size of home purchased. The vast majority of homes purchased right now are between 1,500 and 2,500 square feet. So 1,501 to 2,000 square feet constitutes 28% of all home buyers, and 2,000 square feet to 2,500 constitutes 26% of all home buyers. And so that's the sweet spot, right? 1,500, 2,500, and that makes sense. It's not super shocking. That is the sweet spot where you can get 3 to 4 bedrooms and 2 to 3 bathrooms, which is what people generally want. The median square footage was 1,860 for all buyers. And really the distribution of, if you're looking at this data on YouTube, the distribution holds constant. They broke it down based on all the different age groups, but it remains the same basically pretty closely for all of these, that 1,500 to 2,000 is the top number. 2,000 to 2,500 is second place. And then third place might be either 2,500 to 3,000 or 1,000 to 1,500, just kind of depending on the demographic based on the age of the home buyer. Your home was built. 28% of homes in this survey were built between 1987 through 1962. Very interesting. 20% from 2003 through 1988. 20% also from 1961 through 1919. And then the vast majority so to add that up, that was 68% of homes that are being purchased right now were built between 1919 and 2003. So that is really the sweet spot right now. People are, in Greenville, we don't have a whole lot of homes that are selling from 1919. We see them every now and then, but most of the oldest homes in Greenville that are being sold, typically 30s or 40s is the oldest that we typically have. Greenville's not a super old city, relatively speaking, most of Greenville. And so the vast majority that I see are between 1940 and I think the early 2000s is pretty accurate for our market here. Characteristics of home on which a buyer compromised. I found this very interesting. Most buyers have to compromise. Now, 26% of buyers said they did not have to make any compromise. Well, lucky you. Because 74% had to make some sort of compromise. 33% compromised on the price, 26% on the condition of the home, 23% on the size of the home, 19% on the style of the home, 15% on lot size, 10% on distance from friends or family, 13% on distance from job, 8% quality of neighborhood, 5% quality of schools, 2% distance from school, and then 8% not listed. So this goes, I see this all the time. Buyers are having to compromise somewhere, and the top 4 things on here are exactly, and really the top 5 things are exactly what you see most common: the price, the condition, the size, the style, and the yard size. Those are the things. So most buyers, when they come in, they think, hey, this is my budget. This is what I'm looking for. By the end of the process, they've had to stretch that budget a little bit. They've had to reconsider some other homes in some other areas, perhaps not in perfect condition. And that is what just buyers are having to experience right now in this market. Expected length of tenure in home purchased. I found this fascinating because people have no idea, clearly have no idea how long they're going to live in a home, because 45% of all buyers thought that they would live in a home for 16 or more years. And that is so, I think I've got a slide in here later that shows just how misleading that is. Very few people are going to live in their home for 16 or more years. Most people move, within 5 years of having bought the home that they live in. But it's interesting. Buyers think that they're going to live in a home, generally speaking, a lot longer than they do. 22% of respondents said they expect to live in a home 8 to 10 years. Again, still high. 8% thought 11 to 15 years. High. 4% 6 to 7 years. High. Now we're getting into more realistic numbers. 13% of respondents thought 4 to 5 years. 5% 2 to 3 years, and 2% 1 year or less. Yeah, don't buy a home that you plan to live in for 1 year or less. That's generally speaking not a good idea unless you plan to turn that property into a rental. So what I take from this is when I talk to buyers who say that they are purchasing their forever home, which would put them in that 16 or more category, I'm just going to smile and nod. Length of search. The number of weeks that all buyers on average search for a home was 10 weeks. Great number. That's a great little factoid. 2.5 months is standard median length of time that it takes for someone to buy a home. And the median number of homes viewed was 7. So it typically takes 2.5 months and about 7 homes that you see before you finally find one and are able to get one under contract that you like. How real estate agent was compensated, since realtor compensation is a big talking point right now. I figured I would throw this in there. 52% of real estate agents were compensated by a seller, 25% by the buyer, and 12% jointly between buyer and seller. And of that, 76% were paid a percent of the sales price, as opposed to, there are a few other options on here. 19% of respondents didn't know exactly how their agent was compensated, so that's not great. Sacrifices made to purchase home, okay? What kind of sacrifices did people have to make in their lifestyle in order to become a home owner? And the number one answer on here was, actually, 56% said they did not have to make any sacrifices. So bravo to over half the market is fitting their home purchase within their means. So that's great. They're essentially, this is where they're making sacrifices on the type of home that they're purchasing versus making lifestyle sacrifices. I think that's great. I think that's a very wise decision if you're a home buyer. That being said, 31% opted to cut spending on luxury items or non-essential items. 23% cut spending on entertainment. 18% cut spending on clothes. 12% canceled vacation plans. Man, that's a sad day. 9% paid minimum payments on bills. Ugh. 7% earned extra income through a second job. That's sad if you have to get a second job to buy a house, but I get it. Particularly if you're younger, that could make sense. 6% sold a vehicle or decided not to purchase a vehicle, and 5% moved in with friends or family without paying rent in order to purchase a home. So some interesting sacrifices. Buyers who have student loan debt, this might have been one of the most shocking things out of everything that I looked at here. 23% of all home buyers have student loan debt. But here's the part that's not that crazy. Less than a quarter of buyers have student loan debt. But what blew my mind was this. They ran this data all the way up through age 77, and every demographic had at least a small portion of buyers that had student loan debt. Even the 69 to 77 age-year-old buyers, 4% of them had student loan debt. Now, I don't know if that's, maybe grandparents paying student loan debt for their grandchildren or maybe for their children. I don't know. But 24% for age 44 to 58 have student loan debt. That for sure, I would say, is them paying off their own debt. 35% of my generation, 34 to 43, has student loan debt. 41% of those 25 to 33 have student loan debt. So student loan debt is still very crippling right now, really hurting, at a time when affordability of housing is at all-time lows. To have student loan debt on top of it is really, is really challenging for people right now. Buyers' view of homes as a financial investment. 82% of all buyers said that buying a home is a good financial investment. Now, of that demographic, 44% said better than stocks. You might disagree with that, but not everyone trades or is effective at trading stocks. And so I think that's important there. 28% said about as good as stocks. 10% said not as good as stocks. But apparently still believe that it's a good financial investment, even if it doesn't perform as well as stocks. 5% said not a good financial investment, and 13% said they don't know. So the 5%, they're not buying a home as an investment. They're buying a home as a lifestyle improvement, and that's to be understandable as well. In the Greenville area, they're going to find that it's probably, unless they completely overpaid when they bought, it's still going to end up being a pretty good investment for them because we still see home prices rising in the Greenville market. Age of home sellers. All right, we're going to transition to home sellers here. Age of home sellers. 26% of home sellers were the younger boomers, age 59 to 68. 23% Gen Xers, 44 to 58. Older boomers then were in third place, 69 to 77%. And then older millennials, 17%. So what is this? We got 49. So 68% of home sellers are between 44 and 77 years old. So those are the people selling the most right now, is mid 40s through late 70s. And as far as the household income of home sellers, it's pretty similar to when we looked at the household income of buyers. The largest number on here, $200,000 or more, right? If you're making $200,000 or more, real estate, you have a lot of options at your disposal, right? You can sell investment properties, sell, rental properties, sell your primary residence. You might have multiple residences. Who knows? 200,000 or more, for some people might sound like a lot. It's not necessarily a lot, right? If you're at that closer to 200,000 end of the spectrum, not a whole lot. If you're in the more category and it's a lot more, then obviously you have a lot more options. The second place on here was 100,000 to 125. They made up 15% of home sellers. 125 to 150 were made up 10%. 150 to 175, 9%. 175 to 200, 5%. So the vast majority, again, similar to home buyers, the vast majority of home sellers are making 100,000 or more. And that's because home sellers typically become home buyers. So there's going to be basically the Venn diagram between sellers and buyers there's a ton of overlap between those two categories. Adult composition of home seller household. So again, we're going to look at married couple, single female, single male, unmarried couple, or other. Again, the vast majority, 65% of home sellers are married couples, 20% are single females, 8% are single males, 5% are unmarried couples. Very similar distribution as what we saw with home buyers because, again, they tend to be very similar. Number of children under the age of 18 residing in home seller household. Again, very similar. 75% of all sellers have no children in their household. 10% have one child, 2% have two children, 10%, one child, 10%, two children, 6%, three or more. And where we find the most interesting data is now not just the 34 to 43 demographic, which was the big one for home buyers, but the 25 to 33 demographic also is kind of interesting. So the 25 to 33 age demographic, 33% have no children, but 33% have a child. 23% two children, and 11% three or more. If you're 34 to 43, 26% have no children, 20% one child, and 33% have two children, 21% three or more. So the vast majority of home sellers between 25 and 43 have children, but that drops off big time once you get into 44 to 58. 71% of Gen X it does not have children residing in their household, which is, kind of crazy if you think about it, right? If you're 45 years old, and you typically you would expect that they have children in their late 20s, early 30s, but Gen X did things a little bit differently, okay? A little bit of a unique demographic, and so as a result, they don't have as many children as some of the other demographics traditionally have. Education of home sellers, again, vast majority of home sellers have a bachelor's degree, some grad work, a master's degree, or a doctoral degree. So bachelor's degree, 30%, some grad work, 8%, 24%, master's degree, 7%, doctoral degree. And then the rest, less than high school diploma, or associate's degree makes up 32% of the remainder of home sellers. Size of home purchased compared to home recently sold. I really like this, the way they did this. So they took the size of a home purchased and then compared it to the size of the home sold, and so we can basically reverse engineer whether sellers are moving up or moving down in terms of home size. And the majority of sellers were moved down. There was a minus 200 square foot difference on a meta level between what was sold and what was purchased. So the average sold home was 2,000 square feet and the average purchased home was 1,800 square feet. Now, the age demographics 25 to 33, 34 to 43, and 44 to 58, they are all stepping up. They are all buying, for the most part, larger homes than what they sold. But because of how active boomers are in this market, and the boomers and silent generation are all purchasing smaller homes than what they're selling, because the boomers are so active right now, they are bringing this whole number down to minus 200. And I find that to be absolutely fascinating. This will flip, right? When mortgage rates improve, go down, if and when they improve and go down, and millennials and Gen Xers and Gen Z are able to be more active again, we'll see this number flip back into the positives. But for the time being, boomers are really controlling things a lot more than they typically would, and that's reflected in this data. Primary reason for selling previous home, 33% want to move closer to family or friends. Interesting, because that's not exactly what the number was for home buyers. 13% said the home is too small. 10% said that they had a change in family situation, marriage, divorce, etc. 9% neighborhood has become less desirable. 8% job location. 9% home is too large. 8% moving due to retirement, etc., etc. Long story short, the vast majority are moving because they want to be closer to people that they care about. And that number goes up as they get older. So of respondents, basically 44% of those aged 78 through 98 are selling in order to move closer to family and friends. 35% of those 69 to 77, same thing. And 28% of those 59 to 68 are wanting to move closer to family or friends. Home is too large is a response that is also directly correlated with age. So those over 59 disproportionately are the highest numbers on here wanting to move because their home is currently too large. That's what happens when you become empty nesters. Same thing with moving due to retirement, heavily weighted towards the older demographics. There's also one on here, upkeep of home is too difficult due to health or financial limitations. Also very weighted towards the older demographics there. Tenure in previous home. I found this to be interesting. The median length of homestay is 10 years. Okay. And again, this goes back to what we were looking at with home buyers. A huge portion of the home buyers thought they'd be in their home for 16 years or more. Well, how many home buyers actually stay in a home 16 years or more? It's 36%. So that's basically a third, a little more than a third of home buyers do end up living in a home for greater than 16 years. But the largest number on here, believe it or not, is actually 21 years or more. That's 25% of sellers. And again, it's because of the boomer demographic really skewing these stats in a lot of ways. The second highest number was 4 to 5 years at 14%. No shocker there. I've already said that's what we see most commonly among demographics that aren't that older population. Usually what we see is people eventually, settle down once they become empty nesters or close to empty nesters. That's when they finally settle into their forever home, more often than not. How about the number of times asking price was reduced for a home seller? 68% of sellers did not reduce the asking price. We talked about this recently on the show. We looked at the Greenville data. 19% of sellers reduced the price once, 7% reduced it twice, 4% 3 times, 2% 4 or more. So most sellers are still not having to reduce the price, but a healthy percentage are still, basically a third of sellers are having to reduce the price on their home. Incentives offered to attract buyers by number of weeks home was on the market. 77% offered no incentives. 9% offered home warranty policies. 7% assistance with closing costs. 6% credit towards remodeling or repairs. 3% other incentives such as a car, flat screen TV, etc. Man, I want one of those. I want one of those where I buy a house and am given a car as an incentive. Let me be one of those 3%. 77% not having to make any incentives or concessions. Last slide, and then we're done. Did the seller use the same real estate agent for their home purchase? Again, very interesting data. 46% of sellers used the same agent as they used when they purchased the home. 54% used a different agent. Fascinating data to me as a realtor, right? I, generally speaking, would hope that my clients who use me when I help them to buy a home would use me when they decide to sell. But less than half of sellers have done that. Now, this is also interesting, is that the younger generation is disproportionately more likely to use the same agent. People talk about the younger demographic not being loyal. Well, that's not true here. Ages 25 to 33, 66% of them are more likely to use the same agent. 34 to 43, 57%. And then that curve reverses once we get to 44 to 58%. Only 48% of them are likely to use the same agent that helped them buy their house. And then between ages 59 and 98, basically between 37 and 38% of those in the boomer and silent generation demographics are using the same agent that helped them to buy the home. So very interesting data there. I think probably a lot of this has to do with, not necessarily a lack of loyalty amongst the older generations, but they probably just know a lot more realtors, right? So they have so many options at their disposal. Maybe they used, a random realtor to buy the home, maybe a nephew or something like that. They were just like, I didn't really like that experience. I'm going to use a different agent when I sell the home. Or perhaps they went to the listing agent when they bought the home. They went directly to the listing agent and then later decided, that's not who I want to sell my home when I go to sell. So some very interesting data there. I hope you guys found that to be as interesting as I did. If you have any questions about any of that or any thoughts, please let me know. I'd love to hear from you guys. My contact information is in the show notes if you need to reach out to me for any of your real estate needs. Please like, rate, review, subscribe, all of those good things, and we will talk again next time.